Story 1. Truly incredible that so many of you are experiencing it but never seem to have heard of long COVID. Our leaders are so irresponsible to keep prioritizing the short-term economy over the long-term well-being of humanity. Story 2. Still dealing with the loss of smell and taste. I enjoy heavily seasoned foods and spicy stuff, but I get almost no flavor unless it's on the extreme end of savory or sweet. Story 3. I felt like I've started experiencing brain fog more. It's so frustrating, especially if you're used to being sharp and on top of things. It's like having a constant cloud hanging over you. Story 4. Had COVID twice. I have fatigue and heat intolerance. Before that, I worked in the heat all day. Now I can't be out in the heat for more than 45 minutes without being drenched in sweat and on the verge of heat stroke. Story 5. I'm not sure it was COVID, but in around 2021 I was sick, and after that I started to have problems with short and long-term memory. I just started to mix up words more often, completely forget what someone said, and even forget what I'm doing while doing it. It has gotten better now, but it's still not perfect. Story 6. Well, my most permanent damage has been my friend's wife died at 39 from COVID in December 2020, and it permanently changed him into a husk of a man. The aftermath is I have to continually hear morons saying it was just like a cold. We didn't need to be locked down. Story 7. I have had type 2 diabetes since around 2017. COVID-19 made it much worse. I was sick for about 3 months, and now I have circulation problems in my hands and feet. Not to the point where it is necrotic or anything, but they get very cold in the winter. It did force me to get really serious about the diabetes, and I have lost about 50 pounds and have kept my A1C at around 5.5 for quite some time. Story 8. I had COVID-19 in 2021, and ever since, I've been dealing with lingering brain fog and occasional shortness of breath. It's not as bad as it was initially, but it's definitely impacted my daily life more than I expected. Story 9. No idea, because even mentioning long COVID to a doctor around here gets you a disapproving look and a doubtful glance. Regardless, I'd never had allergies or asthma before COVID, but after having it a few times I now have both, as well as a bizarre level of fatigue at all times. Story 10. Weird, horrible smell hallucinations. Imagine the worst cat diarrhea under the bed at 4 a.m., but when you look, there is nothing there. I experience something like this about once every 2 to 3 weeks. This doesn't include the random bad smells I encounter throughout the day that have no correlation to what is around me. Story 11. My sense of smell never came all the way back properly. It's like my olfactory nerve has a short in it. It's like I'm listening to a string quartet and only hearing the violin most of the time. Story 12. Not me, but a coworker has permanent heart and lung damage. Before COVID-19, he was an extremely healthy and active young man, the kind of guy who would hike the Appalachian or Pacific Crest Trail for months at a time. After COVID-19, he keeps ending up back in the hospital with heart attacks, pneumonia, you name it. It's very sad. Story 13. I have a permanent cough and shortness of breath, but that could be from my weak heart. The one that annoys me is that I went from being an avid reader to struggling to read. Trying to read gives me high anxiety. I suspect it is some brain issue where I'm struggling to decode words. I'm trying to push through, but it has been several years now and I'm not making much progress. It's so frustrating. Story 14. My good friend got diabetes from it. It's a real thing. Story 15. My daughter is permanently changed by COVID. She had pericarditis as a result and an assortment of neurological symptoms. She's 32. She lives like a 70-year-old now. Story 16. This is embarrassing, but here it is. I lost the ability to maintain a prolonged erection during sex. If I wasn't constantly getting friction, I would lose it. So imagine changing positions. It was the absolute worst. It's been some years now since then, and I've naturally recovered most of it. But every once in a while, it happens like 1 out of 25 times. Really terrible. Story 17. Brain fog is cognitive impairment. Some people call it brain damage. Listen to what Professor Jim Jackson, neuropsychologist at Vanderbilt, says. This is the #1 reason I wear a mask, to protect my brain. Story 18. Mystery stomach pains. Blood work points to inflammation somewhere in my body. I have had every test done. No answers. I have lost 1/4 of my body weight as well. Story 19. My lungs have since then gotten flooded with mucus at every minor cold episode, and my coughs hurt way worse. Nothing is worse than not being able to breathe because my body decided fool me once. And now the immune response goes into overdrive anytime something irritates the lungs. Shortness of breath during activities I could easily maintain before. I've had autoimmune and blood pressure issues before, but they've been aggravated by COVID-19. Story 20. Not me, but my kid. She used to walk 5 to 10 miles a day just because. She was bedridden for about 9 months. Now she's very much improved, but she has to use an inhaler sometimes with no prior indications of asthma. I think she got lung damage. She did a month or two of physical therapy and that helped her a lot, but it's been 2 years since then, and she still doesn't have the muscle strength or endurance she used to have. Story 21. I didn't know I had asthma. It was incredibly mild before COVID-19. COVID-19 made it on the moderate end of things, and I am still struggling with shortness of breath and irregular wheeze and cough. My migraines also increased significantly, continue to be an issue, and I have chronic fatigue. Story 22. I didn't make the connection until I read all these comments, but I've had COVID-19 at least 3 times, and my memory is terrible, my energy is terrible, I can't handle sun exposure at all, and my sinuses are terrible all the time. Story 23. Chronic fatigue. Probably caused by COVID-19 and a recognized part of long COVID. It's not just fatigue. There are other things that I have never experienced in my long life, such as anxiety, digestive issues, and more. Story 24. After that study yesterday saying each mild COVID infection causes brain damage, when is the general public going to start talking about this more as a general concern? Are we just going to hit a mass disabling event, a breaking point of an amount of people's brains becoming inflamed? Or is it just so slight that it doesn't even matter? Workforces are retiring, and new kids are not hitting the same benchmarks, but we have artificial intelligence. That isn't the same, and it's killing the planet. Story 25. I can't believe we're all sleepwalking into a neurological apocalypse that will have lasting effects for generations if we even survive climate change. Reading this thread and how many people didn't even know what they were suffering from COVID is such a massive public health failure. It hurts my heart to know what is being done to our species and especially the children. Story 26. My cardiologist thinks that what has been called cardiotoxicity from chemotherapy may have been aggravated by COVID-19. Basically, a muscle in my heart is dead, and COVID-19 may have killed it. I also have constant ear, nose, and sinus issues since my second bout with COVID-19. I care for an elderly woman who is wasting away because she never got her sense of taste and smell back after COVID-19, and it is terrible for her now. Story 27. My husband, in his early 30s, has brain damage. He experiences vertigo and migraines most days, along with significant memory problems and intermittent speech issues. Fatigue, of course. He's lost work because of it and is being seen by the best specialist we could find, but it's probably permanent. The biggest risk for him becoming completely disabled is reinfection, but almost nobody except us wears masks anymore. It's really lonely. He had great health before, never had anything more serious than astigmatism. My mom, who is 60, still has a fever every few days, about 2 years out. She's partially bedbound after her second infection. She had the usual middle-age ailments before, but it's been heartbreaking to see her lose her vibrancy. I beg you on my hands and knees to wear masks more. I worry every day that reinfection will take what little I have left of my family. Story 28. Caught it twice. September 2022 and July 2024. After the first round, I noticed that I would have short-term memory problems more often than before. I think the second round messed with my taste buds a bit because some foods and drinks just tasted different. Thankfully not the ones I love most, but still. Story 29. My brother, in his mid-40s with no family history, otherwise healthy and active, developed diabetes about 2 months after getting COVID-19. He fell down the stairs a few times due to lack of sensitivity in his feet and blurry vision. I basically had to drag him to a hospital to get checked out, then had to beg an endocrinologist to take him as a new patient since they were also overloaded. Story 30. It's completely disabled me. I've been off work for 16 months. I'm preparing for a gradual return to work next month, but we are starting at 2 hours a day, for days a week, to see if it causes a relapse. I got my first infection in March 2020. I had a number of issues, but my largest ones were fatigue and major dizziness upon standing. I tried to get help from my doctor, but she didn't believe in long COVID at the time and gave me some vertigo pills. I slowly got better over the next couple of years, and by the end of 2022, I was in the best shape of my life, despite still having a lot of issues with dizziness, and I had to be careful about being in heat or moving quickly. Despite that, I was heavy lifting with a personal trainer, doing isometric strength training, doing burlesque and pole, and did yoga, more athletic vinyasas, and also a restorative practice. I didn't drink alcohol or coffee, had great sleep hygiene, walked to and from work, hiked and paddle boarded, and lived an active outdoor life. I was reinfected in January 2023. Things went downhill quickly from there. I went to the emergency room with heart attack-like symptoms. Palpitations, chest pain, numbness and tingling down my left arm, and blacked out. This got me into a cardiologist who diagnosed me with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, a form of dysautonomia common after COVID. I continued to go downhill with treatment and got into a complex chronic disease specialist. By May 2023, I was off work, after months of getting all the accommodations I could at work and desperately trying to hold on. I got diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis and was told by an internal medicine specialist to work on accepting your life now because you likely won't get better. About 50% of people with long COVID fit the criteria for myalgic encephalomyelitis, an incurable neuroimmune disease with no official treatments. I continued declining, and by December/January, I was bedridden and started experiencing sudden muscle failure. I couldn't lift my arm to brush my teeth or wash my face, couldn't hold a pen. This spiraled, and I soon couldn't sit in bed or dress myself. My wife had to prop me up, and I couldn't lift a fork to my own mouth. I couldn't tolerate light or sound and had to be in a dark room with whispers. I would spend days just drifting in and out of consciousness. I knew I was getting better when I had enough energy to be bored. I have made progress since then and live life with a lot of adaptations. I use a wheelchair or a rollator when I am out of the house. I can manage short walks outside, but the cognitive load of walking inside somewhere with fluorescent lights and ambient noise like a grocery store causes me to get intense neurological symptoms and I pass out, so I need a wheelchair. I spend several hundred a month on prescriptions and supplements recommended by my doctor for mitochondrial support. I spend more on a specialty diet with no processed foods, sugar, grains, etc. My entire life has become incredibly expensive, and I can't work. I don't know what I would do without my wife. I do a million little things to aid in recovery, eking out 2% improvement here and 0.5% improvement there. I can read again. That was huge. I can go camping if someone else sets up and tears down my gear for me. I can sit on my paddle board sometimes. I went to a gentle yoga class today for the first time in ages. I thought maybe I was ready to do a little bit. I sobbed in my car for half an hour after because I had too much muscle weakness to raise my arms above my head. Couldn't keep up at all. I spend most of my time being positive to neutral, forward-looking. I find joy whenever I can, practice gratitude, love and appreciate my community, and find ways to make my life meaningful. I have still lost so much, and sometimes the grief of it all feels impossible to move through, feels so unfair, and I absolutely rage as I watch people behave as though the pandemic isn't continuing. And each month, I watch posts pop up in the long COVID communities as a new group of long haulers realizes the reason they aren't getting better is because they have joined the world's worst club, because the damage of COVID is cumulative. If it didn't get you on your first or second infection, it just raises the chances of you succumbing on your sixth or ninth. This has absolutely destroyed my life, and while I'm hard at work making a new one, I will never be the same person I was before this. Story 31. I've had COVID-19 several times, but when I got it this past February, it had the longest lasting effects. My taste and smell were gone for a couple of months and still aren't 100%, which is frustrating because I used to have my own bakery business. It's really hard to make a product you feel confident selling when you're unsure if it actually tastes okay. Just last week, I made a pumpkin roll for my family and said I wished I had added more pumpkin because the flavor wasn't really coming through. But my husband said it was actually extremely flavorful. I hope those senses eventually are completely restored because baking is my love language. Story 32. My heart hurts for all of you who are currently still suffering with these long-term effects. And for those of you who have lost someone dear because of this terrible illness, my deepest condolences. I hope you may find peace one day. I am frustrated with every single person and politician who spread disinformation about COVID-19. Too many good people who deserve to still be here are gone forever because of selfishness. Story 33. For 2 years, my hair fell out. I have permanent asthma. When I get sick, I am sick for over a month. Even with a cold, my husband gets over in days. The brain fog is permanent but dependent on hormones, so for 2 weeks of the month, I have major brain fog and can't taste or smell. Story 34. Sometimes I struggle to think of the words when I'm speaking, like it's just on the tip of my tongue. I forgot the word evaluation on Thursday and just had to describe what I was thinking of. I found it's fine if it is rehearsed. But when I need to make it up as I go along, I lose words.